Welcome back, everyone, to Full Spectrum Living with CBD. I am your co-host, Meredith, and I'm here with our hosts, Jessica and Adrian. And they are stoked because they have just gotten back from a massive conference called CanMed. And I think they have a ton to share with us today about the conference and everything that they learned while they were down there. So they were actually arguing about who was going to jump in and share first before we started the episode today. So I think Adrian's going to kick us off with what is CanMed and why did you guys decide to go down there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very excited. I won the coin toss, by the way. It's a medical cannabis conference. Actually, it started in 2016, so it's still pretty young, but it was really interesting because there were several focus areas from cultivation to lab and science to the medical aspects of it. So anybody interested can go to this event and focus in the areas that their business or quite possibly even just their interest as a cannabis consumer, whether it's CBD or THC products. So it was really, really interesting. And it was a microcosm, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So what you see out in the cannabis industry as a whole is you're going to see science more focused on isolation of cannabinoids and looking from a pharmaceutical standpoint. But largely, you have people like us who are focused more on the botanical side of it, the more natural, full spectrum side. And we really saw that take place at this conference, and it was really interesting. I couldn't give you an exact breakdown percentage-wise. I was trying to think, is it 75-25, where more are focused on the full spectrum? But honestly, I'd like to say 90-10 because there was some focus on the really science isolation part of it. And there was a little grumbling from the audience with regards to that. Huh. And a lot of the medical doctors were focused. Well, I'd say, Jessica, and correct me if I'm wrong, probably 100% of the medical doctors there were focused on full spectrum. They said there's a place for the isolation, there's a place for it in pharma, but full spectrum cannabis extracts like ours is going to be the place where people are going to get their relief.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. So the conference has been going on for a few years then, I would assume, but this is the first time that you all decided to go to it. Is that right?
Yes. This was our first year, and we were really kind of fangirling, nerding out on some of the presenters because, again, we follow them. We were very excited to meet some of them. You know, Ralph Meshulam was there. Dr. Dustin Sulak was there. Bonnie Goldstein was there. We were very excited, but we were also introduced to some new ones that we hadn't been following. So we can even kind of delve into what we learned from them as well.
Yeah, for sure. So Jessica, what was your first impressions of being at CanMed?
Oh gosh. Well, it was super exciting. I wanted to add to it that its first year in 2016 was actually at Harvard Medical School. So this is something that has a lot of industry leaders, not just from the States, but around the world who are in attendance and advisors on the board to help you really curate the content of the event to be, like Adrian said, a microcosm of the cannabis industry and all things cannabis, because there are so many topics. But my impression was certainly, like Adrian said, seemed to be, for one, it was incredibly informative, very enjoyable, and kind of split in what people were there and passionate about. And I pointed out and would like to point out, you can kind of tell just by the keynote speakers. It kind of demonstrates that split, I feel like. So for example, like Dr. Raphael Meshulam, who is considered basically like the godfather of the industry. He's been studying and researching this largely out of Israel for 50 years, more than 50 years, I think, and discovered a lot of the key components to the system that this makes up. And he was there speaking very much about the isolated forms, which has been the majority of his research, and specifically like a CBDA methyl ester, which he's working on. And that was really interesting, but it was certainly representative of the direction where this tends to head to more of a pharmaceutical industry. And then you had the second keynote speaker who spoke during the conference, and his name was David Meary, Dr. David Meary, also a researcher, and his presentation was on the two kinds of cannabis that this could be, the pharmaceutical route and the full spectrum whole plant botanical route. And so his points being, there's room for both. There's purpose for both. It does tend to be thought that the whole plant botanical version is going to be the most ideal for most people, most conditions, as it has a broad range of effect in the body, but that the benefits to things like isolated CBD in a very specific serving or milligram dose could have a lot of applications for cancer. That was his main area of research. And then you got like the third speaker, who was Stacy Gruber, who I'd love to talk more about in a minute. And she was someone that should have been on my radar and was not, and she's amazing. I'm pumped to have learned about her. She was talking specifically about the need for research for whole plant botanical extracts, and she was really impressive. I mean, she actually has FDA approval for 4 or 5 different studies using whole plant derived botanical full spectrum CBD rich hemp extracts, primarily for anxiety and dementia type conditions.
So was that surprising to you that there was actually an FDA backing behind a study? I mean, is that kind of one of the first of that level that you've seen?
It's definitely one of the first. And remember, up until here recently, it was a Schedule 1, right? So until the federal farm bill came and then approved and removed those cannabis varieties that are under the 0.3%, you couldn't study them in an FDA clinical trial. So she actually got the first, and that's where her specific trial is on CBD from hemp varieties. And she had some really interesting early results. Nothing's out yet. She shared it with the crowd. Some really impressive things that they're seeing with these extracts. But again, like Jessica said, one of the largest pushes, I feel like every person that went up there to speak, they always ended it with, but we need access. We need more trials. We need to have, we need to do these things with humans, with people. Largely there's a ton of studies out there with regards to cannabis and cannabinoids, but it's largely animal focused, right? So we need to remove these restrictions so that we can have human clinical trials and really see the results that consumers are already reporting from their own use.
I thought something that was interesting is that there were several speakers that it almost seemed like a call for help, just like, please, someone research these things. Like, I'm only one person. I can only study so much. We need this research to be happening. And it was really encouraging to see that a lot of research is happening. It was a lot to process, just the vast amount that still needs to happen to really fully understand everything. I mean, clearly we have a good understanding of its safety profile, and there was a lot of talk to the hard, rephrase that, the difficulties in even finding a side effect to CBD. So that was encouraging, but so much more to actually study regarding cannabis.
So was there any information that was shared that was really, really eye-opening to you? I mean, I'm sure you went in expecting that you were going to hear about research and that you were going to have the chance to meet some kind of industry leaders and things like that, but anything that was just like jaw-dropping, like, whoa, just really changed your thoughts or just blew your mind?
I was going to say, go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, sure.
Jumping in a bit.
Yeah, bring it on. Yeah. So, there was a lot. Jaw dropping, I'm not sure, but, again, I'll go back to Stacy Gruber. So I was incredibly excited to learn about her research. So for one, she works with Harvard Medical School, and she's an associate professor there. And so the quality of her research, I'm sure, is exactly the quality that we need to start showing these connections between things like anxiety and the efficacy for CBD. So I was shocked to learn that she's the first ever to use brain imaging scans to show the effects of cannabis. And she has studied and is studying not just CBD-rich hemp extracts, but she's also been studying medical cannabis with higher THC content and recreational use, and kind of comparing and contrasting. One thing that I thought was really interesting from her presentation was that she really shined a light on the fact that the majority of the existing research that has been done is really just getting the input from recreational cannabis users on what do they use, how do they use it, and what are the effects and side effects, and studying recreational use, where the tendency is that you use a lot higher potency. The goal typically is intoxication, not moderation of like side effects. So there's a big difference in the outcome in brain development and the effects on your cognitive abilities. And she really highlighted that by talking about longitudinal studies where she's compared medical cannabis and recreational cannabis and done brain imaging to show that the effects, for cognitive, like speed and impact, are definitely not there with medical cannabis like people have assumed because of the recreational data that we have.
Wow, that's really interesting. How about you, Adrienne? Anything that was really eye-opener for you?
I was going to say, like, not necessarily life-changing and eye-opener for sure. I did find it reaffirming and comforting, right? So the direction that we're heading, again, largely CBD focused, that being CBD is the most therapeutic cannabinoid out there. Again, THC having its spot and its definite benefit and its need to be in these extracts. But I did find that it was really interesting to kind of see that largely focused around CBD and looking into that. What I also loved, and again, this speaks to me as a mom who has a child who suffers from epilepsy or did, was listening to Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, who is focused on children and, whether it's autism or epilepsy. And it was her take on the FDA-approved drug Epidiolex. And I always said, I think I said it in a previous episode, that it offended me as a parent that the FDA would approve such a drug, because everybody knows that you shouldn't give a child something that has alcohol in it. And Epidiolex has a 10% alcohol content. In addition to that, it has sucralose, right? And so sucralose and alcohol can both have effects on the liver. And, one from an inflammatory standpoint. And so you're giving this to children. It's FDA approved. And so she found it to be, again, as offensive as I did, which honestly just made me fangirl even more, because it's something that she doesn't recommend for her patients. Again, she focuses on those high CBD botanical extracts, full spectrum, that are as close to the plant as they can possibly get. And to me, it was exciting. And I even met with her afterwards and told her that I thanked her, and I'm thanking her for the parents that she deals with. I'm sure they thank her enough. But as she continues that fight to help push for that botanical product, for the more natural, for better relief for everybody.
Mm-hmm. So how does going to this conference and gaining all of this information, kind of getting the affirmation of your thoughts and beliefs and extension of your knowledge base, how are you guys going to bring that to the work that you do each day? Are you seeing that there's some opportunities for you there?
Oh, absolutely. Just from learning and meeting new people and seeing the studies that they're taking it. But there was also other people there from industry, whether it was through lab equipment and through technologies that we were actually looking to implement in our own business. So it was really nice to be introduced to them, because it's a great event to go and see that. Also to see that affirmation with testing and pushing and so forth, with moving the industry forward to where quite possibly maybe we don't have to have the FDA or the government into every little business. Again, as long as the industry is going to self-regulate. So again, finding ways for us to expand upon that as a whole company to help push the industry forward is what I'm looking at from a business standpoint, in ways to help educate and keep the conversation moving forward. For me personally, I don't know about Jessica.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the education for our clients and the resources to know, like, there are other physicians in this area even and across the United States that are working towards getting this whole plant access for our clients. And so when, we're stumped at someone who's not responding as positively as we can, I think this shines some light on how we can help them and resources to potentially provide them to ensure better success.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So of everything that you saw, do you have a favorite?
I'm going to say the dumplings. So that was not part of CanMed. But we have to give credit. We were walking by, this place, we're looking for some place to eat, and they had the best dumplings. So good that we went back the second day. And honestly, I can't remember the name of the place, but I'm going to put it in the blog.
It was amazing.
Because they were life-changing.
Yeah, they were.
The conference was in the Bay Area? Is that right?
It was in Pasadena.
Oh, in Pasadena. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I can second that. I was denied dumplings the day before. That's where this all started. So we're on a search. Some really, really good food. And I wanted to add that I got to really fangirl maybe with so Dr. Dustin Sulak was present, and he's just such an icon for specifically what we're doing, where we're offering the full spectrum whole plant and using it strictly for therapeutic potential. So he was there, and I felt like he was kind of the rock star of the whole event. I mean, his main speech that he did on the second day got 4 or 5 rounds of applause, and I think he was the only one that got interrupted with applause during the speech. So I think that kind of stood out, and he was mentioned by a lot of the other physicians multiple times in their presentations for the content that he had delivered throughout the event. He also was participating in the CME course, so the continuing medical education aspect of CanMed, which was 4 credentialed hours for CMEs for medical providers. And Bonnie Goldstein and Kevin Speldman were hosting that segment, which was really a really nice part to be involved in as well. We were able to attend most of that. And I got to speak with him personally. So that was exciting. Got a little selfie that we can post with Sulak.
He's a very down-to-earth, easy man to talk to. And you can tell he's very passionate. He believes everything. Jessica, I don't know if you want to share what he kind of told you when you asked him a question about your son.
Yeah. So, the more I've experienced CBD, the more I've mentioned before that I want to use it for preventative methods. And so I asked him, I said, I have a 3-year-old son. I would love to use CBD regularly for him as a preventative method, just in a very small amount. To help to protect him in his central nervous system. And I'm just scared that even though I live in a legal state, if something were to happen and he tested positive for any THC, then that I don't even want to go there at how scary that could get as a parent. And so I asked him, what are your thoughts on prevention and using it in children? And essentially he said, well, if you have to, that's one thing. I don't think it would be dangerous. But have you looked at his diet? Have you looked at his omega-3 to 6 balance? That's where you start. It starts in the gut. It starts with your proteins, with what you're taking in. And there are more ways than supplementation through cannabis to affect positively your endocannabinoid system. So look at omega-3 to 6 ratios. Try for a 4-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, I believe is the ratio he suggested. And that was really encouraging. There's another thing that that I could try that at least would in no way be harmful. It would be just another positive step in the right direction for his health. So.
That sounds like you guys had just a fantastic time when you're down there, and that you've got a lot of content to share out now on the blog. But if someone wanted to know a little bit more about the work you do and how you're applying what you learned at CanMed, then where would they go to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So visit our website at bluegrasshempoil.com and definitely look to the blog, because we'll be updating and we'll be adding some of the studies that we found that we weren't privy to before. We didn't know it existed, and sharing kind of that information that we found really promising and impressive.
Fantastic. Well, for this episode of Full Spectrum Living with CBD, I am Meredith, your co-host, here with our hosts, Jessica and Adrian, and we'll see you the next time.
Bye.
Bye.